5 minutes after the hour of 8:05, 630 KHOW. It's a Tuesday morning, 24th of July, 007. Let's just go right to work. Years ago, when I first got into this business, I actually had a face-to-face in the studio with Mr. Bugliosi when his book Helter Skelter, and he had done a second book on another murder case, and I've forgotten the title of that book, and that's when we first met. And now his book, Reclaiming History, The Assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Mr. Bugliosi, good morning. Thank you for coming on the show.
Happy to be on the show, Peter.
What was the name of that second book?
Well, I've had quite a few true crime books, but three they got up to number one in the New York Times bestseller list. Helter Skelter on the Manson case, which I prosecuted, of course. And then there was Outrage, the 5 reasons why O.J. Simpson got away with murder.
No, there was another murder case. It was...
and The Sea Will Tell was another murder case. I had Till Death Us Do Part. They've all gotten way up on the bestseller list. But Reclaiming History, to be candid, is my magnum opus, the book of my career. The Kennedy case, as you know, is the most important murder case in American history, and I put over 20 years into the book. It's the book on the case. There's no question about it, and I believe that's the reason why Tom Hanks and his people are doing a 10-hour miniseries for HBO on the book. Do you have the book in front of you, Peter?
No, sir. I want to cop to it right away. I'm an avid fan, and I think, modestly, he said, I've read a tremendous amount about the assassination. I don't have the book, neither have I read it. I've listened to you interviewed.
Well, there's no excuse that they haven't sent you a copy
That's okay.
of the book.
That's right. I think, modestly, he believes he's capable of doing it. I've listened to you interviewed 3 times, and I think I watched one interview. And I'm an absolute geek about what happened, and I'm a geek about the Kennedys and the aftermath. Mm-hmm. And I've not heard you speak about the connections between the Kennedy family and organized crime and the so-called double cross. And I'm with you on Ruby being nothing more than Ruby.
Right.
And there are other and I'm with you kind of on Oswald, although I don't know what quite to do with Lee Harvey Oswald. Ruby, I still have some problems with, but I think he's Ruby. The real issues are Jack Kennedy's relationship with organized crime, his father's relationship with organized crime, especially Sam Giancana, Tony Arcardo, guys that turn up so many times.
Joe Kennedy did, but there's no evidence that John F. Kennedy had any relationship with organized crime, although he was sharing a bed with a woman who was involved with Sam Giancana, but
Judith
Kennedy had no relationship with with organized crime.
Do you believe that his father turned the corner in the West Virginia primaries?
I don't think there's any question that Joe Kennedy was very instrumental in helping his helping his son get elected.
No, that's not.
He put an enormous amount of money into it, but that doesn't translate into their being involved in any way whatsoever in the assassination. There's not a speck of evidence that organized crime was involved. They were under electronic surveillance by the FBI throughout this entire period, talking about murder, all types of crime, not the slightest hint that they were going to go after the President of the United States. You have to realize that organized crime has no history whatsoever of going after public figures in America. In Sicily, of course, they routinely murdered prosecutors, police chiefs, and everything. Not in America. No history whatsoever.
But that, because something doesn't happen before, doesn't make it logical or illogical.
Except if you have some evidence, and there's not a speck of evidence that organized crime was involved.
Yeah, that's what I want to pursue. First of all, do you accept that Joe Kennedy, that the win needed to happen in West Virginia, and this is why I'm so happy to be with you. The primary win had to happen in West Virginia. It was up against Hubert Humphrey, not Lyndon Johnson. They roll into West Virginia. There's a tremendous amount of at least people talking publicly that organized crime with the dirty unions and cops on the fix and polls in West Virginia, a Roman Catholic wins, and Joe Kennedy makes that happen with the organized criminals out of Illinois. But he goes back to Frank Costello. He goes back before Frank Costello. He's deeply involved with these guys. Would you accept that?
Yeah, going back to a prohibition, but where does it go?
Well, here's my question.
Where does it go?
Okay, I'm going to take you there. So they fix West Virginia, and Jack wins the primary. It doesn't mean that Jack knows about it,
right?
But they fix West Virginia for Jack. He then rolls into Wisconsin, defeats Humphrey there, and rolls into Illinois,
right.
and there's a knockdown drag out in the convention.
Right.
But because they fix Illinois, they fix the election there. As you know, Nixon goes to Alaska because he claims he wants to go to every state.
Right.
He goes to Alaska, and it's so fine, and the election is turned in Cook County. That's where the win takes place. Cook County is incredibly. It's Tony.
Actually not. Actually not. He had enough electoral votes to win apart.
But it wasn't.
Illinois.
They didn't try.
But certainly, the mob came through for him in Illinois. No question about it.
And why would they do that? Because it ties into Cuba as well. I mean, why would they do the West Virginia job and do the Illinois job?
Well, it's not quite as clear as you're saying the West Virginia
but I'm asking.
job.
It's evidence.
It's tenuous, but certainly Joe Kennedy uses influence with the mob to help the president. But where does that go?
Okay, let me, if I could pursue, because you're the man.
Yeah.
All right, so the win takes place there. Jack gets the presidency. One of the things that Castro does is when he eliminates Batista, he also eliminates organized crime that really is controlling the casinos in Havana.
Right.
And we do know factually that organized crime and CIA are involved in gun running operations. They do meet. The so-called rogue faction meets with organized crime. They meet with Sam Giancana.
They broke bread to kill Castro. No question about it.
Of course.
Okay.
Then they're
Where does that go now?
Again, if I could, please. They're in bed with Alpha 66. They're in bed with Omega 7. They're in bed with these people. CIA, organized crime.
Right.
We're all in bed together. Then comes Bay of Pigs. Kennedy. Yesterday we had Legacy of Ashes on. We had Weiner's new book. They really do. After this is over, Jack Kennedy, who is holding on by a thread, Jack Kennedy makes the deal to allow. They call it Monroe Doctrine, Truman Corollary of Monroe Doctrine, and then Jack Kennedy makes the deal with Khrushchev, and the Jupiter C missiles come out of Turkey, and the missiles leave Cuba. At this point, he has double-crossed the organized criminals. He's double-crossed the Cuban exiles. He's double-crossed everybody. They don't get their safe haven back. They don't get anything back, and they see him now, in the words of the Giancanas, as a double-crosser. Mm-hmm. Do you buy that?
Yes and no. There's no evidence that Kennedy was aware of all this.
I'm not talking
Joe behind the scenes was trying to help out. There's no evidence that John F. Kennedy.
I'm not talking about him
these
knowing.
Guys helped me out.
No, I'm not talking about him personally, because there comes the moment where he's going to go to Sinatra's, and Sinatra clearly has carried his water. I mean, Sinatra admits it. Other people admit it. That Sinatra is a colleague, a friend, if you would, of all of these guys. Remember, Robert Roy catches them all in Havana together. Sinatra sitting around with, every Carlo Gambino's there, for God's sake.
Right.
And so Jack's hanging out with these guys. They're fixing him up with Marilyn Monroe. Jack's living the life with the boys.
Well, he's hanging out with Frank Sinatra. He's not hanging out with any member of the mob.
No, I'm not saying with members of the mob. No, sir. Again, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there is relationships that go back. So now we're at this crossroads, and the organized criminals, and plus Bobby, after they've asked, Bobby not to, Bobby goes after Jimmy Hoffa.
With a missionary zeal.
Absolutely. Goes after Jimmy, and they know all these things are coming their way. Mm-hmm. And Judith Campbell, whether you accept her or reject her, says she carried messages. Do you believe that?
That's silly. No,
I don't know.
No one believes that. No one believes that. She came up with that story years later when she's trying to give some significance to her life. I mean, the preposterous notion that JFK is giving money to Judith Campbell to deliver money to Sam Giancana. No one accepts that story. And it was investigated very, very thoroughly, the House Select Committee on Assassination, and they rejected it out of hand.
But the House Committee also believed that there was more than the gunshots, according to that tape.
Yeah, but now you're going into a totally
No, I'm not.
Separate,
no, sir, I'm not.
Separate issue.
But we're talking about that same commission.
Yes.
So is there when the idea to bring out the Bay of Pigs prisoners, and they do the Orange Bowl with the tractors?
Right.
Do you believe there was an assassin that day?
Do I believe there was a what?
An assassin that day. Many people believe that when Jack Kennedy goes to the Rose Bowl, and what they've done is they're going to trade as you probably know, they're going to trade the Zapata veterans.
They already had done that.
No, but they were giving them tractors. They were giving Castro tractors.
Yeah, and that's why he returned the people
right, exactly.
captured the
no,
Bay of Pigs.
That's my point. I was just saying that.
Right.
And they do it in the Orange Bowl.
Right.
And there are people that believe that was not that far late, not that much later. Jack's dead in Dallas.
Well, yeah, the Orange Bowl thing was in late December of 1962, right?
Right. Do you believe, as others do, that there were two groups, Alpha 66 and Omega 7, and they were the veterans who had been, they believed, also double-crossed by the Kennedys not taking Monroe Doctrine, Truman Corollary, and moving in with the Marines into and back their play to overthrow
giving
Castro.
air support to the Bay of Pigs.
They flew down the
Kennedy
beach.
said very, very upfront publicly that there would be no air support, no military involvement in the Bay of Pigs. But I have to agree that the Bay of Pigs people thought that was public stuff, that there would be air support. I agree.
The CIA told these guys, you go ahead and go. And according to the diaries of the Zapata Swamp survivors, they saw American airplanes. They saw American ships.
They were there. They helped them. They brought them right to the Bay of Pigs.
So was there, again, I use these words again, Mr. Bugliosi, was there a double cross there?
No, there was not a double cross, but I think you're right. The Bay of Pigs veterans thought there was a double cross. They absolutely assumed that when there was Judgment Day in the Bay of Pigs, that the American military would provide air support. Although Kennedy
said no.
In a press conference said there's not going to be any air support.
They believed that,
they believed it, right?
They believed that the Kennedys
chickened out. So where you're all going to now, Peter, is motive, right?
Mr. Bugliosi, do you believe that organized crime and those anti-Castro Cubans were operating together?
Absolutely.
Or do you believe CIA and organized crime was operating together?
Absolutely.
Do you believe that Jack was going to break the CIA?
No.
Well, he said he was.
He allegedly made a statement that he was going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces.
Right.
There's never been any confirmation that he said that, but there is confirmation that shortly after the Bay of Pigs, even though he was disappointed in them, because he gave them information that once they invaded Cuba, the Cuban people were going to rise up against Castro, and that never happened.
They believed it.
Right.
And also, Allen Dulles, John Foster Dulles' brother, the great planner of this, Allen Dulles is then they get rid of Allen Dulles.
Right.
And this new book, Brother to Brother, which I haven't read, I've read some reviews on
Absolutely silly. Absolutely. So the whole tenet of that book is that RFK thought that there was a conspiracy behind the assassination. By the way, that is a very, very disputed point. But even assuming, arguendo, that he thought there was a conspiracy, where does that go?
I don't know.
LBJ thought that Castro was behind the assassination.
Yes, he did.
Now, you can come up with evidence that LBJ and RFK had access to some classified information, that's different.
Hated each other, despised each other. But here's why I'm trapped. And I so want to believe, and I'm a huge fan of yours, don't misunderstand.
Yeah.
I'm looked forward to this for a long time, having you here.
Yeah.
Everything that my belief system says, that from listening to people and reading, that the Kennedys, Bobby Kennedy's not a nice guy. And Jack is Jack, and Joe was Joe.
Everyone loved Jack Kennedy. Bobby, people loved him, but they also hated him.
They were afraid of him.
Yeah.
But he was so geared.
But Peter, where does this all go?
That to get rid of Jack Kennedy. I mean, what was the great line? You got to kill the snake, you cut off its head. That Bobby if you could get rid of Bobby by getting rid of Jack.
Yeah. Now, how's that going to help the situation?
Because
RFK remained Attorney General on LBJ for almost an entire year, and if he thought the mob was behind the assassination, he would have brought pressure and a heat on the organized crime higher than the heat on the sun.
But LBJ marginalizes, and as a matter of fact, the prosecutions on Hoffa, and by the way, remember they Tony Arcardo reclaims power of the outfit in Chicago. Right. That there's the whole thing happens in Chicago, and the deportation of Sam Giancana, who eventually, when he's coming back, and as you know, the House Select Committee wants to talk to two people, Johnny Rosselli and Sam Giancana. They both end up murdered. Do you
they
think?
did talk to Johnny Rosselli, and the House Select Committee said that the murder of Sam Giancana had nothing to do with the assassination.
Yeah, but see, other people say it did, and I don't. I mean, why would, just as he comes back from Mexico, he's living as, he's been marginalized by the mob. He's Sam Giancana, and all of a sudden he gets hit with a subpoena, and he ends up shot around the mouth 5 times, the mark of the squealer, and Johnny Rosselli ends up
the
chainsawed.
House Select Committee had every reason in the world to conclude there was a conspiracy. So why would they conclude that Sam Giancana's death had nothing to do with the mob?
I think it did.
Well, I think it had something to do with the mob, but not silencing him with respect to the JFK assassination.
Why not?
Why would the mob kill JFK? Give me one reason.
No, not kill JFK. To get rid of John Kennedy was because he, in the words of the Giancanas, was a double cross. He had double crossed them.
He could have double crossed them 10 times over, and you do not take on the President of the United States. If you want to live. If you want to live. And there's no evidence that they did that. Where's the evidence?
Mr. Bugliosi,
all you're giving me, Peter, is motive. Motive only goes so far.
I understand. With the same things.
CIA had a motive. Everyone had a motive.
No, not everyone.
That only goes so far.
Oh, no, it isn't. I understand that, but we can say the same thing with Patsy Ramsey or Bill Clinton. I mean, motive gives you reason to suspect.
Yeah, well, if President Bush were killed tomorrow, there'd be all types of people you could say had a motive to kill him. But somewhere along the line, you have to pay the piper, and you have to come up. Wait a moment. You have to come up with evidence that the person who you say had a motive is the same person that committed the crime. And you can only do that by evidence. There's not a speck of evidence that organized crime was involved in this assassination. And the House Select Committee, who eventually, because of that dictabelt, fourth shot from the grassy knoll, they had every reason to conclude there was a conspiracy. They said organized crime was not involved.
I understand that, but you and I are talking speculatively about issues that have always driven my mind to inquire. Do you believe, for instance, that there was the fourth shot?
Absolutely not.
Well, what did
Absolutely not.
But you just used the House Select Committee a moment ago, Mr. Bugliosi. They believed it.
Absolutely, they believed it. But it was based on the notion that on this fourth shot dictabelt, you could pick up a sound in Dealey Plaza. They said
off the motorcycle.
That was a fourth shot. Yeah. And are you aware that a year later, the National Academy of Sciences heard the same sounds on this dictabelt, and they proved conclusively that those sounds were made a minute later as the presidential limousine was long gone down the Stemmons Freeway on the way to Parkland Hospital. That's been totally discredited by the National Academy of Sciences.
So and
mainstream conspiracy theorists don't even make that argument. When I prosecuted Oswald in London, Jerry Spence never even raised the issue.
Listen, forget Jerry Spence. I've had a bad experience with Jerry Spence. What I'm saying to you is, you use the committee then, but you reject the committee there. I mean, the committee. Well,
no.
All right.
No, I'm not. No. I'm giving you the findings of the House Select Committee. They had every reason to conclude that the organized crime or whatever these groups were involved behind the assassination. Why? Because they conclude that there was a conspiracy. They had every reason to say that there was, and yet they said there's no evidence that organized crime, the CIA, or any of these other groups were behind the assassination. They based their whole thing on this fourth shot thing, and it's been discredited. It's been discredited completely.
Let's come back to it. I need to take a pause. Can I take a pause?
Yeah.
All right. Vincent Bugliosi is our guest. The book is Reclaiming History. I've waited for a long time to speak to Mr. Bugliosi because I'm fascinated by this moment. It's a Tuesday, 24th of July. I'm Peter Boyles, 630 KHW, Denver's talk station. Up to the minute traffic. Here's Susan. It's 28 after the hour, 8:28, 630 KHOW, Denver's talk station. Vincent Bugliosi is our guest, Reclaiming History, Assassination of President John Kennedy. Why, I guess, let's turn it the other way. Why isn't it?
Okay, yeah, let's get away from motive. This silly Oliver Stone came up with 10 groups that had a motive, and according to Stone, all 10 were involved in the assassination. Even bitter enemies like the KGB and the CIA, they all had a motive according to him. So they all got involved. Let's go away from motive and let's talk about evidence. I just wrote a piece for Time magazine a couple weeks ago. It was a whole page, and let me try to summarize for you. And we're talking about evidence now. There's no credible, and let's underline the word credible, evidence that the CIA or mob or any of these groups were involved in the assassination. I quote prosecuted Oswald, Peter, in 1986 in London. Jerry Spence, you've heard of him. Sure. He defended Oswald. We had a regular federal jury, regular federal judge. We worked on the case for 5 months, no script whatsoever. The Dallas jury returned a verdict of guilty against Oswald. I told the jury in London, I said, folks, 3 people can keep a secret, but only
2 of them are
dead.
That's right.
And here we have, close to 45 years later, and not one word, not one syllable has leaked out that there was a conspiracy, and yet there was this vast conspiracy. According to the conspiracy buffs, not one word is leaked out. Why? There's nothing to leak out. Number 2, there's no evidence that Oswald ever had any association or connection with any of these groups believed to be behind the assassination. And God knows the FBI conducted a thorough investigation of this guy from the moment he arrived back from the Soviet Union to the United States on June 13th, 1962, to the day of the assassination. They conducted 25,000 interviews. They found no evidence that Oswald ever had any association with any of these groups. Number 3, assuming one of these groups wanted to kill the president, and I reject it absolutely out of hand. It's the type of thing that should be in a Robert Ludlum novel. But, of course, in the book, I go into it in great depth. Reclaiming History is the only book, whether you're aware of that or not, Peter, on the assassination that has ever addressed all of these conspiracy theories and demolished every single one of them. And major reviews around the country have all said that I totally destroyed every single conspiracy theory out there. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that they decided to kill the president. Oswald would have been one of the last people on the face of this earth whom they would have gone to. Why? Well, he was not an expert shot. He was a good shot, but not an expert shot. He had a $12 mail-order rifle. He was notoriously unreliable, extremely unstable. Here's a guy, Peter, that defects to the Soviet Union pre-Gorbachev. I mean, even today, who in the world defects to the Soviet Union? He gets over there, wants to become a Soviet citizen. They turn him down. What does he do? He slashes his wrist, tries to commit suicide. Just the type of guy, and I'm being sarcastic here, but just the type of guy that the CIA or mob would want to rely upon to commit the biggest murder in American history. 4th point. Assuming, again, for the sake of argument, that they decided to kill Kennedy and they wanted Oswald to be the hitman, and he agreed to go along with it. Let's see if where that takes us, Peter, makes any sense. After he left the book depository building, one of 2 things would have happened. The first thing that would have happened is the least likely. There would have been a car waiting for him to help him escape down to Mexico, Costa Rica, wherever. Certainly, the conspirators would not want their hitman to be apprehended and interrogated by the authorities.
I'd still like to ask questions. After Timothy McVeigh blows up the Mira office building, he gets into a Mercury 4-door with a license plate hanging off and takes out of town. I mean,
okay, all right. And I'm saying now I'm going to get into the Oswald situation.
Right.
That's the least likely situation.
But there are people.
The most likely situation, Peter, by far, if the CIA or mob, like you say, said, let's get Oswald to kill Kennedy for us, the most likely situation by far, there would have been a car waiting for him, Peter, to drive him to his death. You know that would have happened. And yet we know that Oswald was out on the street with $13 in his pocket trying to flag down buses and cabs.
They're going to a movie theater.
Pardon?
He goes to the movie theater.
Well, the first thing he was doing was trying to flag down buses and cabs. If you want to talk about Oswald's guilt, but that fact alone shows there was no conspiracy. He's out on the street. No one is helping him escape. No one is trying to kill him.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about how I see Oswald is like I don't place Oswald in great importance, and I know that
great importance.
No, hang on just a second.
He's
please.
The guy that killed Kennedy.
Yes, he certainly. But again, the FBI knows about him. The FBI has investigated him. The FBI knows he's attempted to go to Soviet embassy in Mexico. They know all this.
No, he didn't. No.
I thought he attempted to.
No attempt to kill anyone down in Mexico.
No, I didn't say kill. Did he go to the Soviet embassy?
Absolutely.
All right. Now, do you believe, Mr. Bugliosi, that
he was trying to get a visa to Castro?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
But do you believe the people who talk about his role in U2 in Japan?
He had no role in U-2 in Japan. That's just an allegation. There's no evidence.
I understand
to support
that,
it.
but what about the guys who called him bugs, or were in a core with him, that saw him on the strip in Tokyo with, they said, $100 a night geishas with guys that look, I mean, these are guys under oath, former members of the Corps, that said with it, we saw him there, and that he had a way to have the kinds of things that would have granted. Do you believe any of that?
Well, I told you he had $13 in his pocket.
No, I'm talking about when he was in Japan.
Yeah. Now, if you're saying that the KGB, now you're saying the KGB was behind the assassination.
I'm not saying it. I'm asking whether or not you believe
him
it.
in Japan. Who?
Well, the guys that, I'm sure you read this, the guys that he was in a Corps with when he was in Japan, who called him bugs. They didn't, because of the Oswald Rabbit thing.
He was in the courtroom with him?
He was in the Corps, in the Marine Corps.
Oh, yes, the Marine Corps, yes.
Yes. And these are the guys in the barracks with him that would see him on the Ginza. And they would see him, and they testified that. I read it in their books. They said, we saw bugs with geishas that were way out of our price range as privates. And they saw other guys, as they said, were Western looking. I'm not saying who they were, but they were dressed in Western style, not in traditional Japanese clothing. They were Western people. They see this guy in these places together.
No.
Does that make any sense? No. Okay.
No.
Right.
He did have a Western geisha. He did save his money very religiously. But again, where does this go? I'll tell you where it goes.
I don't know where it goes.
The
I'm asking a
allegation is that the KGB enlisted him. If they were going to enlist him, wouldn't they keep him at that base in Japan to give them information? Why would they take him
he
to
gets out of the court.
Russia, where they're completely debilitated?
Again,
how's he going to help them over in Russia?
Mr. Bugliosi,
they keep him in Japan to give him information.
No, because
on the
remember, I think he gets a DH.
He gets a what?
Doesn't he get a? How's he get out of the Marine Corps?
He gets out on a hardship thing.
I thought he got a DH, a dishonorable discharge.
No, absolutely. He got a dishonorable discharge from the Marine Reserve. No, he got an
I thought he had a DH.
All right. Discharge from the Marine. Now, I'm trying to figure out where we were. Well, I was talking about they would have driven him to his death. The presidential motorcade route, Peter, wasn't determined until November 18th, 4 days before the assassination. That's the route that took him right below the sixth-floor window.
I know.
Does anyone believe that the CIA or mob is going to conspire with this guy to kill Kennedy within 4 days of Kennedy visiting Dallas? It doesn't make any sense.
But again, do you believe that in the Orange Bowl that there was a killer that day, or perhaps even there are people that believe that the people I've read, and again, you can discount it and say there's no
conspiracy theories. Got a million conspiracy theories, but they don't come up with any evidence. No.
There are people that believe the killer was there that day.
The killer was there that day. That's a new one. I mean, there's no question, no serious question that anyone can have about the Kennedy case that's not going to be answered somewhere within the 1,600 pages of my book, plus 100 other questions the average person would never even dream of. And now you're coming up with something that's not in the book.
No, I'm not.
You're saying there was
asking
a hitman at the Orange Bowl?
No, sir. There are people.
Who made that allegation?
Oh, I've read that in a number of different other.
Oh, no, you did.
Yes, I have. I didn't make it up.
You've been told that. You didn't read that.
Of course
I read
have.
all the books.
I have
no allegation of that whatsoever.
Oh, my heavens. I thought in Double Cross they had talked about it. Did you read the Giancana's book?
Well, that's the silliest thing in the world. That's Giancana's brother after Sam died.
His cousin, I thought.
He says he's fond of him, and then he says Sam Giancana was not only behind Kennedy's assassination, but behind Marilyn Monroe's assassination,
there was a book,
and also RFK. That's silliness.
Well,
silliness.
There was a book about Peter Lawford entitled "The Man Who Kept the Secrets," and they certainly. Do you believe Bobby was even there when the day that she died? I mean, guys,
Bobby was
in California.
There's no evidence of that.
Well, sure, there is.
There's an allegation of that.
No, he was visiting.
Wait a minute. Where does that go? Are you saying that Bobby Kennedy was behind Marilyn Monroe's death?
Did Bobby know about it? Did Peter Lawford? Did they take the body out of the house and then bring it back as the court says?
In all deference to you, you're asking good questions, but you are a conspiracy buff. There's no question about it. You're a conspiracy buff, which is fine.
No, there's
fine.
Not being a buff, just somebody doesn't have questions that are answered. Hang on, sir. I need to turn around again. Vincent Bugliosi, 22 before the hour of 9, 630 KHOW, Denver's talk station. I'm behind. I apologize, Mr. Bugliosi. Up the minute traffic or Susan. S- 17 before the hour of 9 o'clock, 630 KHOW on a really hot Tuesday, the 24th of July. It's going to reach pushing 100 today. Vincent Bugliosi is our guest. His book on the assassination of John Kennedy, Reclaiming History. Tom Hanks, we were talking a little bit off air. Tom Hanks has taken this on, if you would, sir.
Well, yeah, because this book is the book on the case, and like the L.A. Times says, it's a book for the ages, and they say this. With reclaiming history, from this point forward, no reasonable... See, you haven't read the book, but
no, sir, I haven't.
Reasonable person can argue that Lee Harvey Oswald was innocent. No sane person can take seriously assertions that Kennedy was killed by the CIA, Castro, the mob, the Soviets, etc. Reclaiming history may finally move these accusations beyond civilized debate. Finally, someone has put all the pieces together. It is a book for the ages. Scott Turow, of course, you've heard of him. Mm-hmm. He just came out with a review that centuries from now, people were going to be reading this book. Yeah, Tom Hanks and his people are doing a 10-hour miniseries on the book for HBO. It is the book on the case. It's 1,600 pages. There's a CD with another 1,100 pages. And, Peter, you have to know that I did not write this book for the money. Certainly, I hoped it would make money. Don't get me there's no confusion on that. But when you're writing a book for the money, you don't write 1,600 pages in a society that wants instant gratification and reads 200, 300, 400 pages books. And also, it's 2 to 3 times more expensive than any book out there. Although on Amazon.com, for some crazy reason, they're selling it very, very low. It's the book on the case. You cannot read it with a fair mind without coming to the conclusion that Oswald killed Kennedy and acts it alone. It's the first book on the assassination, whether you believe it or not, that addresses all of these conspiracy theories and completely demolishes them. And I just gave you the review from the L.A. Times, but the Philadelphia Inquirer says 100 years from now, when people want to know what the assassination was all about, this is the book to read. Wall Street Journal, unlike any book ever written on the assassination. You've got to read the book, Peter. You know, you're a very intelligent guy. You want to get into the details, but I can tell you that everything you've been talking about is motive. And somewhere along the line, you've got to pay the piper and come up with evidence. There's no evidence that anyone was involved in this assassination other than Oswald. Further, who in the world is going to conspire with Oswald? And we know that Oswald killed Kennedy. You know it was his murder weapon. There's
no doubt in my mind.
You're aware that he's the only guy that left the book depository building.
No, I don't doubt any of
that.
that. Pardon? I don't doubt any of that.
Yeah, he killed Officer J.D. Tippett 45 minutes later.
Absolutely.
30 minutes later, he resists arrest.
Absolutely.
Pulls a gun on the arresting officer.
No, I don't doubt. And Mr. Bugliosi...
Okay, but when you have a nut like that, these groups you're talking about, why would they conspire with him of all people? And if they did... Once he killed Kennedy, they're going to drive this guy to his death. They're not going to have him out in the street there flagging down buses and cabs.
One of the things that is the lasting troubling part of this, for me, is, and by the way, there's a most recent book now on the Lincoln assassination.
Yes.
About, truly a conspiracy.
It's never going to end,
And I'm saying to you that, all right, let's jump to this. Oswald is a stumper, but what my personal belief is that Oswald was there. Oswald pulled the trigger. Oswald's who he was.
Right.
But there are, you say, theories and motives, but they're far, for me, even the Jimmy Hoffa connections and the connections in organized crime and Jack and Bobby and particularly Joe's connections and the fact that they did double-cross, in the words of the Giancanas, they did double-cross the outfit in West Virginia and in Chicago.
Yeah, so the mob is going to say, okay, now we're going to kill Kennedy, and of course there's going to be a heat brought on us higher than the surface of the sun, and we're going to be apprehended, and we're going to be executed. No. There's no evidence throughout all the years that the mob was involved. Nothing. All the electronic surveillance that picked up every word these guys were saying, not even a hint that they were talking about killing Kennedy.
Well, there was a book called The Hoffa Wars. Have you seen that book?
Yeah.
All right. And there were wiretaps, and Jimmy's talking about shooting them off a building, and
No.
Well, he did.
No.
I mean, what about the lawyer?
There's nothing on tape about Jimmy Hoffa saying, "Let's kill the president."
No. You don't misunderstand me. I did not say that. I'm saying Jimmy's talking about assassinations on these tapes, and there's two guys that are of interest to me: Carlos Marcello and Santos Traficante.
Right.
Do they play out in this at all with you?
Oh, yeah, of course. I cover it. There's nothing on the assassination that's not in this book.
Again, I haven't read the book.
It's the first complete book on the assassination, and I'm very angry with W.W. Norton for not sending you a copy.
What do you do with Traficante and Carlos Marcello? I mean, Bobby deports Carlos Marcello to, Guatemala, I think.
Yeah, right. So he had a motive for being angry at him. But where does it go? You're angry at someone? I mean, the whole issue of these conspiracy theories is that if someone had a motive, ergo, they must have killed the president.
David,
meaning this. That if you have a president out there that's pursuing policies antithetical to your interests, well, you simply kill them. If you're Wall Street or the unions, you don't like the president, you simply kill them.
Well,
you realize how silly that is?
I'm not saying it's silly. I'm saying, what about this relationship with this guy, David Ferry and Oswald?
Well, there was nothing. No relationship at all. They were shown once in the CAP group down there when Oswald was about 15. He's not standing next to Ferry. Ferry was involved with the CAB, the Civil Air Patrol, and there's Oswald. No relationship between Oswald and Ferry. Ferry died a natural death.
Well, he left a suicide note, didn't he? I mean, he left a. I thought Ferry was a suicide.
Well, the coroner there said that he died from a ruptured aneurysm, and now, unless you want to bring the coroner into it and saying he was covering up.
I always believed that, and I've read, and again, I don't have your expertise here, but I believe that Ferry didn't Ferry have a foot in some very strange worlds as well? Did he pilot Santos, or was he involved in any of that kind of stuff?
That's what he claimed. Again, no. You got to realize that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have claimed to have been involved in this case. I can't tell you that people have come up to me and said, Mr. Bugliosi, I had an uncle or a brother, or I myself helped you in the Manson case. I said, really? I've never heard of you before.
Yeah, I know. I'm not.
They all want their 15 minutes of fame. But Ferry had nothing to do with the assassination. The FBI concluded that, and if you read The Trail of Assassins by James Garrison, who's been totally discredited,
I agree.
He himself did not say that Ferry was involved in the assassination, but Oliver Stone comes along, resurrects
I reject that.
Garrison from his legal grave, and starts to say that Ferry was behind the assassination.
Let me ask you a really interesting question that I've thought about for a long, long time, and then come back and answer it. The DA, Jim Garrison, who gets all this acclaim early on, there are people that I read that say Carlos Marcello had such a lock on New Orleans that nobody would have been a DA without his approval. Yeah,
no evidence that Garrison got any money from Marcello, but you got to realize Marcello was not a typical mobster.
No, he's not.
John Volz, who was the U.S. attorney down there, said the mob in New Orleans totally different from the East Coast, where they were killing people routinely. Marcello was only into gambling, and Volz just absolutely laughs at the suggestion that Marcello was behind the assassination.
The book Mafia Kingfish.
Yeah, very poorly supported book by citations, very, very loosely written. He has no evidence that Marcello was involved, but he had a motive again.
Yeah.
Because RFK was trying to deport him, so he didn't like that, so he kills the president.
He did deport him. He got him deported. Hang on, sir. We'll come right back, wrap it up with Vincent Bugliosi. This is excellent. It's a Tuesday, 6:30 KHOW.